about a minute into the descent, whatever it was, moved extremely quickly. I mean, within a second and a half, from being 3 miles off our starboard wing, around onto our nose. And turned around, away from it, and the damn thing followed us, still paralleling us. So it must have accelerated because it was on the outside of the turn. So at that stage, we told the passengers, and every man and his dog ran over to the starboard side of the aircraft and had their noses pressed against the windows.
Welcome to UFO Radio International, investigative podcast show about UFO phenomena. And here is your host, Juliano Marinkovic.
And yes, this is he, and this is our special episode. UFO Radio International, when I originally formed it 10 years ago, and as I mentioned in episode 1, this is the reboot of the show. So I always wanted to apply investigative approach, as one of my trades is investigative journalist. So today I will lead you towards 1970s, and we will go to New Zealand. So this is the case I discovered a few years ago, and the case features pilot Peter Maher, and it's quite an exceptional case for my standards. First of all, it's an aeronautical incident. It's a radar-visual case. The phenomena, or the UAP or UFO, was detected by the ground radar, and it was detected also by the flight radar inside of the airplane. The phenomena was seen visually, and there was interaction between the airplane and between the phenomena. What originally drew me to this case was quite a few similarities with another case that I am now researching for 21 years. The case is called the Pan Adria Incident. It was titled by the name of the company for which this airplane that was involved in the incident flew. I discovered the case back in 1996. Formerly, I was signal intelligence specialist, and through my connections back in 1990s, I discovered that on the University of Traffic Sciences in Zagreb, Croatia, the professor held a class where he mentioned the UFO incident. Some students, they were studying to be future pilots, informed me about that event that happened in the classroom. So I immediately called up this professor, and he told me everything that he knew about the incident. And now, in the meantime, I discovered and located and interviewed numerous witnesses that were in the airplane, that were on the airport, that were in the air traffic controller room. So we have multiple witnesses now from this incident that they talked and described in detail their perspectives and their experiences. So the case happened, the best what I know so far, based on the last revision of the most accurate date when it happened. So the case happened in 1976. It involved airplane Fokker 227. The flight was from Zagreb to Belgrade. Somewhere before the descent toward the Belgrade, the Fokker was started to be followed by the strange phenomena, or the ball of reddish light. The airplane landed, but the phenomena stayed on the level of clouds about the airport in Belgrade. So after 1 hour or more, the airplane took off again, and phenomena started to follow the airplane like it did before. And during the flight, actually, pilot tried to turn the airplane towards the phenomena, and almost a near collision happened. It was quite a drama in the air traffic control room, where controllers started to shout, turn away immediately, turn away immediately. After that, nothing drastically happened anymore for the crew of Fokker 227. In the end, the UFO turned away from the airplane back towards the Belgrade. And at that point, military intervention actually happened. The MiG-21s were scrambled, and there is much more to the story. But anyway, now, so this case happened in 1976, and then I discovered the case of Peter Maher above New Zealand that happened in a relatively similar time span, somewhere in 1975 or maybe 1976. Almost very similar model of the airplane. His airplane was Fokker 27. And this is the short outline of the case. I'll try to describe it shortly here, and then Peter will go into great detail. I also created the map that you can open in the description of this show, so you can better follow up Peter's testimony, and you can better understand the configuration of the geography, the relation between the cities, and the flight of the Fokker and the flight of the UFO. So Peter took off from Tauranga, which is the northern island of the New Zealand, and he flew towards northwestern direction towards the Auckland. And quite similarly, like in Pan Adria case, the phenomena started to follow the airplane, maintaining the similar distance. Above Auckland, when the plane started to descend, air prox situation happened. The phenomena speeded up towards the airplane very fast, which was very dramatic. And after that, phenomena left with enormous speed towards Lake Taupo. Peter actually started his stopwatch trying to calculate the speed of the UFO, which also reminded me to the Kenneth Arnold sighting from 1947. You can check up the details of that case in my second episode with Dr. Bruce Maccabee. So I'm looking forward to present you this interview. Took me quite an effort to locate Mr. Maher. Took me actually a couple of weeks. Of course, I didn't work on it full time. I was working from time to time. I discovered his case on a few websites. I would like also specially to thank Mr. Matthew Tyler from Haunted Auckland, who helped me a lot to locate Mr. Maher. I was almost there at the point to abort the search, and the last telephone number that I dialed was actually Peter. So how about that? So I am quite happy that he granted me the interview. He was quite a gentleman. I highly enjoyed our conversation. It was such a gain to hear this case from the technical aspects, from the history of the phenomena too, and for me personally, because for the last 21 years, I'm especially interested in the aeronautical side of the UFO phenomena. I interviewed numerous pilots, air crews. I think I have, oh my God, almost over 40 hours of recorded interviews that were never published in the full form, that happened in the region of former Yugoslavia, and Western researchers are not aware of it. I'm writing a book about it for the last 5 years. Some cases are extraordinary. I spoke with 5 generals so far about these incidents. I even located and interviewed MiG-21 pilots that were on special assignments to intercept, and they even got orders to shut down UFOs. So cases that are currently not in the public domain for Western researchers. I shared the cases in the past with quite a few good colleagues. I even discussed it with Richard Hines from NARCAP, but I do plan in the future to translate all this material and to present it. Let's move now back to the New Zealand case from the middle of 1970s. Fokker 27 flight from Tauranga to Auckland, an exceptional UFO incident that happened in the air. Coming up in a minute, Peter Maher with telephone line directly from New Zealand. I'm honored tonight to welcome Mr. Peter Maher, all the way back from New Zealand, across the planet, and it took me some effort to contact him, and he was so kind enough to grant me the interview about a very important incident concerning unidentified aerial phenomena. But before we delve deeper into that, I would like for Peter to present himself to our listeners and to give more insights about his aeronautical career. So, Peter, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Maher. I've got a flying career that spanned near on 35 years. I began flying in the Royal Australian Air Force, while I was a serving member of the New Zealand Forces. I got through number 1 BFTS, number 67 flying course, and went back into the Army, of all things, which is very strange, but that's the way things happen. I was commissioned in the Australian Army as a reservist, and I actually took up a position in the Armoured Corps as a troop sergeant initially, and then after my commissioning, I went back to the infantry. The career that I have had spanned a lot of different aspects. I flew, while I was still in the military, I flew as a commercial pilot. I had qualified also as commercial pilot, and I was at that stage in the reserve, in the military reserve, in the infantry, and I was flying every chance I could get and trying to build ours. I did things like flying de Havilland Beavers on freight up and down the east coast of Australia, and working at Wilton with Parachutes Australia, dropping parachutists, and occasionally getting paid in kind. Actually, they would run short of funds, so they'd say, you can make up the difference in jumps. So I used to leap out of the aircraft, not my aircraft, but somebody else was flying, on occasion, and ended up with a total of about 67 civil jumps, I think. And after a while, after that, in New Zealand, I actually got another 20 military jumps. So I was doing that. In the meantime, I also had a job. Not only was I a reservist in the Army, but and flying, but I was working at the University of Sydney in the Aeronautical Engineering Department as a technical officer. And we're doing interesting sort of research. Actually, that's probably one of the best jobs I ever had. It was a great job, and I'd be given a task by some of the professional staff, some of the profs, and they would just let me go and sort it out myself and come back with the results, which was really a great way to earn a living. Anyway, I was still short of a large number of hours looking at an airline career, so I wrote off 174 letters, or had them printed off, and sent them all around the world, and got 2 positive replies, one in Northern Australia and another one in New Guinea. And the Northern Australian one actually paid real money, so I got on a train, because I didn't have any money at that stage, and took the train up into the middle of Queensland. And by the time I got there, the job was gone. So I came back. I forget how much money. I didn't have much money in my pocket when I arrived home, and in Sydney, and I ended up getting an offer to ferry an aircraft, a U-206 Cessna, with a stall kit, to New Guinea, which took about 5 days. We got rained in Innisfail, the wettest place in Australia. We got stuck there for a few days, but it took about 5 days total to reach Idapy on the north coast of New Guinea. And that's where I left the aircraft and then was ferried across to further deep into the bush on the north coast, right up against the Indonesian border, at an old German trading town called Wanimo, with a V, V-A-N-I-M-O. And I was working as a bush pilot there for a bunch of missionaries. I did that 1970-71. So that was, and I managed to survive, which was even better. Had 3 near misses, very near in one case, but I managed to walk away and came back, did some more flying in Australia, and then headed across the Tasman to New Zealand, where while I was in New Guinea, I was corresponding with a lady that I'd met before I went. She was in London, and I was in New Guinea, and we corresponded. I came back to Australia, worked for a little while, headed across the Tasman, and we got married. I worked as an instructor, both in Gisborne and Auckland, and then got a job with National Airline Corporation, which was eventually absorbed by Air New Zealand. And I flew a number of aircraft, F-27 Fokkers, Fokker Friendships, 200s, 300s, and 500s, Boeing 200s and 500s, Boeing 737s, 200s and 300s, a DC-8, the last of the DC-8 in passenger mode for a year and a half, 2 years, and then in the as a 63 series DC-8 in cargo mode, flying all kinds of cargo, including a baby elephant, over 3,500 racehorses and pacers, and a pride of lions out of Australia to New Zealand. Lots of very, very interesting flying, and that was probably the most interesting flying job I had commercially. I also, then after that, I flew Boeing 747s and eventually came back on 767s, both 200s and 300s. So that's my flying career. In the meantime, I was in the Army and climbed up various levels and ended up as the Acting Deputy Director of Military Intelligence, which was interesting. And that was when New Zealand and the US and NZAS parted ways, and effectively New Zealand had to re-establish the Intelligence Corps from a standing start. That was an interesting job of over 5 years. In the meantime, I kept on flying. The actual incident, and I've had a few incidents, but they're all explainable except this one.
I wanted to chime in just shortly. Thank you for this really nice breakdown of your career, and I was wondering, because I found one point that you were previously went to school in Sydney, so I was always wondering how you end up in New Zealand, so that explains it nicely.
These Kiwi women that come across on raiding parties and carry off poor innocent Australian guys, take them back to New Zealand.
Anyway, that's a really rich career, and some parts I didn't expect at all. I think there is a book in there somewhere. But anyway, we can now go back to this very important incident that happened in the 70s. So if you can set the stage for us, I actually found 2 dates. One date is winter 1975, and another website it says is 1979 December. So maybe you will be able to clear up the dates.
It was 75. It wasn't 79. Okay. By 79, I was flying Boeing 737s.
Oh, great. That resolves it then. Okay, so we can go back to that crucial day. Can you lead us through of?
Hold on, let me think. 73, 74, 75, 76, 77. Actually, no, it wasn't going to be 79. I was definitely on Boeings. Yes, sure. It must have been 75 in that case. I would have thought it would have been probably a little bit later than that, maybe 76 or 77, but I honestly, I can't remember off the top of my head now. I'd have to go back and dig through notes.
Yeah, we can then say the rough time span of 1975 to 1977 at this stage until
probably in there somewhere.
Yeah, great. So you can let us through of that crucial day, how your day looked, what were your obligations. I think you already done one route from Auckland to Tauranga, and then
Yes, it was a typical puddle jumper type day, flying a F-27, about 40 passengers, or 40 passenger aircraft, and 2 cabin crew and 2 pilots. Turboprop aircraft, high wing, pretty stock standard. Fairchild is the type in the US. They call them Fairchilds there, but normally a Fokker F-27. I believe we had done a couple of legs, I'm not sure where, earlier in the day. We had dinner in Auckland, and then we had another couple of legs, one Auckland, Tauranga, and the other one Tauranga back to Auckland, and that's where we're going to finish. So that's where all the action happened. It was evening, and it was a bit of a dark and stormy night. It wasn't too bad, actually. The flight to Tauranga was stock standard. Nothing really happened out of the ordinary. We climbed out of, it was overcast, heavy overcast, 8/8 of strata Q, and we climbed out, we topped out at about 3,000 feet out through the top, and then there was a higher overcast. It was forecast 14 to 15,000 feet of stratocumulus and autocumulus. So it was effectively auto-Q, solid 8/8 above us. So we were flying in the spare space in between the two layers of solid cloud. As I said, into Tauranga, no problems at all. A little light rain, but we turned around and within about 25 minutes we were out of there and headed back to Auckland, looking forward to getting home.
Okay, so the first flight was from Auckland to Tauranga, and now you have a second flight from Tauranga to Auckland, so you are now going back. That is the heart of our story. So what happened on that flight?
We had topped out at 10,000 feet, which was reasonably low, but it was a very short sector, and we just leveled off and sorted everything out, and was sitting back and expecting no problems at all. And at that stage, I was just wandering, looking out my starboard window. I was in co-pilot seat, and I saw what looked like the flare from Marsden Point oil refinery. It was a bright orange, solid flare. It looked like a long-distance flare. And I thought, there's Marsden Point. And then I thought, wait a minute, we've got a solid overcast over the whole of northern New Zealand at 3,000 feet tops. How can I see the flare? And then I got my chart out and had a quick look. And I knew what we were on the radial. We were actually on the Auckland-Tauranga radial, flying back towards Auckland. And I knew where we were. We had distance measuring equipment, DME, so it was a vortex. So I knew pretty well exactly where we were. And the flare was not where it was supposed to be. It should have been further on the nose, but it was almost a bemus. So I said to the skipper, that looks like Marsden Point. What's our bearing? Marsden Point's in the wrong place. And he looked and said, no, that's not Marsden Point. And he agreed it was at least 30 degrees further onto our nose. So we looked at this for a while, and it just, flying along, looked like it was tracking with us. It wasn't receding behind us, as you would believe something would. So we thought, maybe it's an aircraft. We'd better find out if we've got some traffic.
So it seems that this strange light started to follow your plane. How the Auckland Tower responded to your report? So
we called up Auckland Radar and said, this is national, I forget what the thing, 1234 will say, national 1234, Tauranga, Auckland, and we've got an unidentified light off to our starboard side. have you got anything on radar? And they said, have we got any other traffic up here? And they said, no traffic. And I said, anything on radar? And they said, stand by. And they looked and said, yes, we've got an echo, an air return, 3 miles on your starboard side, paralleling your course.
Which confirmed your visual sighting then from the radar too.
Exactly. So he said, okay. And then I thought, first of all, actually, when we were mucking around looking at it, deciding what it was, we tried a few things out, like we turned all the lights off, everything, nav lights, internal lights, and we even dimmed the cockpit lights to see if it was an internal reflection. And it didn't make any difference, it was still there, so we turned all the lights up. And then we did to Auckland radar and said, have you got anything? And they said, yes, it's 3 miles away. So he said, okay. And Auckland said, it's paralleling your course. So 3 miles is not that far, actually. So we decided we'll see if we can turn away from it a little. So we said, are we cleared left of track? And Auckland radar said, yeah, affirmative. Cleared left of track 30 degrees.
Oh, yeah, and this is a crucial part. You tried to turn away from the phenomena with your plane, and you actually did two maneuvers. First, you tried to turn away, and then you tried to turn back with your plane again. So how the phenomena responded in both of these two occasions?
We turned 30 degrees, just banked right one turn, and turned around away from it. And the damn thing followed us, still paralleling us. So it must have accelerated because it was on the outside of the turn. And it formated on us. So we decided we better turn all our lights on to make sure it could see us. So we turned every light on, including the landing lights. And I suggested to the skipper, seeing it's formating on us, see if it turns away from us. And he said, well, I don't know. I said, just a nice gentle turn, just a 10-degree bank. So he banked 10 degrees, and I said, can you tell us if we're getting closer to it, to radar? And we turned back towards it very, very slowly with all our lights blazing, and the light paralleled us again and turned away from us. So at that stage, we told the passengers, and every man and his dog ran over to the starboard side of the aircraft and had their noses pressed against the windows. We had about 20 passengers on the flight. So it was about half full. So everyone was on the starboard side watching this thing. And then it did that for another couple of minutes, just parallel us. We left our lights on. And then we decided it was coming up towards top of ascent. And we're going to start on down. So we asked Auckland if we could descend. They said, affirmative, descend initially 5,000 feet.
And yes, while all this drama was unfolding, you reached the descent stage of the flight towards Auckland airport. And this is part of the story that I'm finding particularly fascinating when I was originally reading your case. So during this descent stage, the crew actually experienced extreme close encounter from the phenomena towards the airplane. Can you tell us more about that?
So we pulled the power back and started on down about 1,000 feet a minute. And about a minute into the descent, the whatever it was, moved extremely quickly. I mean, within a second and a half, from being 3 miles off or 3 nautical miles off our starboard wing, around onto our nose. And that kind of surprised us a little bit. And we said to Auckland, and it did it in a second and a half. So it covered a lot of space. It covered 6 miles in a second and a half. So we said or more than 6 miles actually. So we said to Auckland radar again, have you still got the target? And he said, affirmative, it's now about 3 miles ahead of you. So this kind of surprised us more than a bit. And I didn't actually, because it was mainly stratiform cloud, I didn't have my radar turned on, my weather radar turned on. But I decided I'd do that because even though it's weather radar, if you're careful with the pitch of the beam, you can actually pick up solid objects. So I turned it to the smallest scale, which was 7 nautical miles. That was the smallest scale on the radar. It had about 5 different scales, but that was the smallest one. And then tilted the radar beam up and down until I picked up a solid return at about 2.8 miles
so
ahead of us.
We have now 2 radar detection actually, from the ground and from your airplane too.
So 2 radars at the same time, and we still had it visually.
Okay.
So then we thought, well, is it going to come all the way into Auckland with us? And at this stage, we're approaching 5,000 feet. We asked for a further descent, and they said, affirmative, you can track onto the Whitford NDB, non-directional beacon, about 10 miles off the end of runway 23 at Auckland, and carry out an ILS approach. Expect to break clear at about 1,500 to 2,000 feet. That's where we should have come out of the bottom of the cloud. So we, just as we started to do that, the object, which was still ahead of us, still looking exactly the same, a very, very bright light. I'm guessing if you know what Sirius looks like, and I'm also an amateur astronomer I was with the Auckland Observatory for a while. But if you know what Sirius looks like, it was about equivalent to about 3 or 4 Siriuses.
Okay.
In brightness. And it approached us. It flew in the space of about just over a second. It went from 3 miles ahead of us to directly over top of us. We didn't get a view of the shape or anything, just this really bright light whipped straight over the top of us. And as it went over, I pushed my stopwatch, and I said to Auckland Radar, it's just flying over the top of us. Can you tell us when you lose it? And when he said, yep, we've just lost it, it's climbing above radar at 60,000 feet, and it's at Taupo, Lake Taupo, which would have been, we were still about 20 miles, let's say about 180 nautical miles south.
Yeah.
It did that in 28 seconds. And they lost it climbing through 60,000 feet. And it didn't, and it was obviously crossed a second and a half, or just 1.4 seconds to do 3 miles. It was motoring, and there was no sonic boom, no shock wave, no nothing.
So while past your airplane, you took a clock. You start to use the clock while you were listening the ground radar, and then you were able to calculate the distance. While the phenomena took with enormous speed from the Auckland towards southeastern direction. Towards Lake Taupo, and I checked on the map the distance between these 2 points.
The distance.
Right.
So by the time the average speed to Lake Taupo, that 180 miles, was about in kilometres an hour for Europeans, at about 45,000 kilometres per hour.
Oh my God!
So and then the rest of the flight, and then we kind of looked at each other and said, are we going to put the incident report in? I said, well, I'd like to. The skipper said, yep, we'll put it in. And we said to radar, we're going to file an incident report. And the radar guy said, yep, I am too. And then we switched over to, we did the ILS and popped out at 2,000 as promised, and landed, and went over, put the reports in, and didn't expect anything. What can you say? Something was unidentified. We tried on, you name it, every frequency we tried, and Auckland Radar tried lots of frequencies as well. I've actually forgot to tell you that. We tried all the normal frequencies and didn't get any response. Auckland Radar tried both VHF and HF, and it didn't get anything. So it was unidentified. It was certainly flying. Of course, it had manoeuvred with us. And it was an object, because at one stage we had 2 radars at the same time, recording it as well as having it in visual sight. So I guess it was a UFO.
Yeah, by definition, definitely, I think that's
definition.
The most objective.
I had no idea what it was.
Exactly.
It was unidentified, it was flying, and it was an object.
Yeah, I think that's the most objective conclusion that we can draw. I think your case was really exceptional because there are numerous technical aspects of the case. And actually, if I was listening this without any comparison with some other cases, I would probably say, okay, it's a one-off case. But there is actually some pattern with other aeronautical incidents, and that's what drew me to your case. It's a really nice breakdown, and I will try to put some map next to your interview so listeners could better understand the configuration of the cities and the north.
Okay, Tauranga is to the southeast or east-southeast of Auckland. It's a city of about, I guess, 100,000 people. Auckland's just over 1 million. And we were on the actual radial. I can't remember the radial now. It was something like 098 or something. I can't remember. The radial is a direct line from Auckland to Tauranga. Radio bearing. That's about all I can tell you.
Yeah,
the rest is speculation, as they say.
Of course. Regarding the light itself and the intensity, like you already described, could you see the outline of the light? Anything sort of, or it was
just a solid blob. It was like a star. It was like a very, very large red star. As I said, many times the size of Sirius. That's why I thought it was a flare. From Marsden Point, the flare on the top of the tower burning off gas.
Yeah, I checked that also on the map, and it's really nicely when you see on the map the Marsden Point oil refinery, right? And
that's right.
Yeah, and exactly when your captain said no, it's more to the left, and your light was more to the starboard, it can be nicely seen on the map, the configuration. That's great.
But also, oil flares don't fly and formate on you, and they don't fly around in front of you either.
That's correct. I think that the most dramatic aspect of the incident was during the descent to Auckland, when the light sort of accelerated towards you, like we already previously described. What was the feelings in the cockpit at that time when you were witnessing that?
A little bit surprised, but I didn't have enough time to actually think about it. It was under a minute and a half. It would have been about, I think it was about, I estimate 1.3, 1.4 seconds. It was less than 2 seconds. So, I didn't really have a lot of time to think about, we're going to have an air-to-air collision or whatever. I didn't even bother thinking about that. It was kind of, and then it was over.
Yeah, you was in your routine procedures trying to land the plane, and that was your focus. Auckland tried actually to contact on the air frequencies to see is there any...
Actually suggested that. When we saw it, we also called up. Before we even told Auckland that we had what looked like another aircraft up here, we actually tried calling on the radar frequency, and we tried the ground frequency. We tried ground frequency at Tauranga. We tried the chatter frequency, and nothing. Well, we tried the emergency frequency too, emergency VHF frequency, nothing. Then Auckland radar tried as well, nothing.
Yeah, and the end of the incident, like you nicely described, when in 28 seconds it reached Taupo, and I think when we convert the kilometers, the speed is about Mach 20 plus, right? Somewhere.
At least Mach 20, yeah. But absolutely no sonic boom.
Yeah, that was my question. So no reported sonic boom at all, even from...
None.
Yeah.
None. We certainly didn't hear any. But inside an aircraft, chances are you may not. But there was no sonic booms reported anywhere. That's right down the line from Auckland, between Auckland and Taupo, Lake Taupo. Just nothing.
Yeah. Like you said, passengers were glued to the window. They were following it. The whole. I think even the crew member Hosty came to your cockpit, tried to see it.
She came roaring up to the cockpit and saying, "What the hell are you guys doing?"
Yeah,
and she was had her nose stuck against the window on my side of the cockpit as well. She was watching it for a while, but
yeah,
she was quite surprised.
Did you kept in touch with any of these members or passengers? Did you talk with Julian?
No, I didn't actually. And we kind of looked at each other and we said, "Well, it is what it is." I said to the skipper, "Look, it is what it is. We'll put in a incident report, and I don't believe we're going to hear anything more about this because there isn't anything to say. We've actually reported everything, and you can start wild speculation, but the facts are the facts, and that was about it."
Exactly. One website actually named your captain. Is he still alive? Are you in touch with him?
Oh, he's not. He passed away, actually.
That's unfortunate. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, we can definitely try to sort of correlate if there any conventional explanation, what you nicely did at some of the previous interviews. But maybe before we dwell into that, we can you can shortly describe also your another experience with ball of lighting that was happening when you went to school in Sydney.
That's right. Actually, I was 12 years old, and our class was unbelievable class. In New South Wales, the state of New South Wales, they had at that stage about 5 million people living in New South Wales, and within our class, the top 15 in our class of 72 people, so the top 15 were all in the top 100 in the state, including the first, second, and fifth. So it was an unbelievable class. It was just one of those flukes. Anyway, we were kept together as a class, same teacher in both Year 5 and 6, the last 2 years of primary school, 11 and 12. Very, very good teacher. And he was teaching away and in the middle of this thunderstorm just after lunch, and the windows were all open. It was the middle of summer, and it was hot, and it was sticky. And the thunder was roaring outside, and through the back window, a ball of light about the size of maybe a little smaller than a basketball, about a softball, yeah, about that, came in through the back window, and floated up. There was 1, 2, 3 rows of desks, and it floated up between 2 rows of desks, and everyone kind of leapt onto the floor and away from it, and it took about 3 or 4 seconds to float about a metre above the floor, up between the rows of desks, and then went out through I think, was the door open? No, the door was closed. I think they had louvers, and it went out through there, and then across a veranda, covered veranda, and outside. And we all kind of, after no one was saying anything, everyone erupted and ran out the door trying to find it, just to see it, but it was gone. And it was, by the sound of it, just ball lightning.
Yeah, that is really a rare thing to witness, so that was really interesting to hear from the first hand how it looks. And yeah, a ball of lightning mostly have very short living time, so that right. Your case confirms it. But anyway, the first association when I'm speaking about these cases from, for example, maybe a member of the public that maybe don't have a good background of the history of such phenomena, they will say, well, probably it could be ball of lightning. Well, I guess in some instances, some plasma manifestation could explain some cases that are shortly lived and depending on the conditions. But in your case, how would you correlate that proposed explanation with what you saw?
I would seriously question that because, one, the length of time of the observation. So we were in the cruise and we were watching this for 4 or 5 minutes, and then it whipped around on the nose and was another minute or so there. So that's more like 5 to 6 minutes. And plasma doesn't follow the aircraft either at 3 miles, and it doesn't formate on you. So we turned away from it. It came with us. So it actually had to accelerate to stay abeam us. And then when we turned gently back towards it, it again formated on us and maintained its distance on radar. So plasma doesn't actually do that. And then it whipped around the front of us. And I'm not sure about. I'm guessing that plasma would show up on radar. I just don't know. I'm guessing it does. It's a ball of superheated gas, so that probably would show up on radar. I don't know, but it certainly didn't react or act like a plasma.
Yeah, and I think also you mentioned.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think you also mentioned. Yeah, you had the weather radar in the Fokker, and I have another case actually, which is not usually used to detect other airplanes and so on. Although it could be used if the target is on the front. And
yeah, that's right. Only in the front. Yeah, it's a weather radar, so it picks up the size of droplets of water. That's what it records. That's what it bounces off. So the larger the droplets, they tend to be very large droplets of water in clouds where vertical wind is very high, and then the water has time to accumulate into a larger drop, and it changes colour. So initially you'd get a green return from small water droplets, then it would turn to yellow, and then to yellow, and then to red, and then to purple. And purple would be an extremely large water droplet, and you stay right away from that because there's huge vertical shears going on, wind shears. So it's made for recording water droplets, but we knew that you could bounce it's a very thin pencil beam, but if you tilted it up and down. We had just a normal knob. You could tilt the beam up and down until you recorded a solid aircraft. So you could do it as long as it was just on the nose of the aircraft.
Sure. And comparing those solid returns with some previous events of conventional aircrafts, and comparing with this return of this particular night, how would you make a comparison? Was it larger, stronger, or on that line?
It was purple, which meant that it was maximum return.
Oh,
so normally purple would be very large water droplets. This was purple return, meaning that it was returning most of the reflected signal, radar signal.
Yeah, so it was strong. You mentioned that there was no follow-up in the newspapers, nothing, and I actually checked the New Zealand.
They never let it go. As I said, it is what it is. It was 8/8 cloud under us and 8/8 clouds above us, and theoretically we were the only aircraft there in that airspace. So people on the ground wouldn't have seen anything. And I don't know what they filed, or I guess filed it away as an unknown return, unknown incident, and left it at that. We talked about it. We talked about some of the other crews, and they'd seen a few things. I used to fly with a chap called Bruce Caffey. Some of your listeners might have read some of his books.
Harmonic,
and Bruce,
33 harmonic.
Yeah, he was a wild-eyed looking guy. He had great bushy black eyebrows and swept back black hair and black eyes. He was pretty wild, but he was a really, really nice guy, and he was an extremely good navigator. And he had all these theories. But I read 3 of his books, and I thought he was a bit cranky. Actually, I thought he was going off on a tangent. But he was a lovely guy to fly with. But very interesting to talk to.
Oh yeah, sure.
He never convinced me. Put it that way.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with you. Just wanted to explore one additional possible explanation that also was thrown quite loftily. That is that in these situations, most likely there are some sort of spy airplanes, which, well, in your case, if we take the description of the light and the speeds, I think it is not fitting, but maybe you can also try to draw any comparison if there was any possibility in the 70s that we could compare the performances with any aircraft at the time.
I would say without a shadow of a doubt, zero chance. Absolutely no chance. Aircraft, and just moving 1.4 seconds, they would have been pulling 100 Gs, more than that. I'm guessing. I could do the calculation, but you can do the calculations yourself. If you move 3 nautical miles, that's 18,000 feet. Say about about 5 kilometres in a second, just under a second and a half. How many Gs you'd be pulling? And it'd be a lot. And you'd be a smear on the back of the aircraft seat. So obviously his inertial frame of reference wasn't the same as ours. He was doing things that was impossible for an aircraft to do.
Exactly.
If it was a he.
Yeah, exactly. What drew me to your incident was really these nice technical aspects: radar detection from 2 radars, from the air, from the ground, then almost air prox situation when it went towards you. And I just make a short comparison with another case that I discovered. It could be maybe interested to you. It happened in 1976 above former Yugoslavia. The airplane was Fokker 227, and the route was from Zagreb to Belgrade, and similarly like in your case, the red ball started to follow the plane and exactly on always the same distance and on the same speed as the airplane. This is what immediately drew me to your case.
That's right.
When they went to descent,
a bright orange.
Yeah, in your case it was bright orange. In theirs, they said it was more reddish, but performances were similar. And then they went to descent. The phenomena stayed on the level of the clouds. And after 1 hour or more, they took off again. And then phenomena started to follow them again. And then,
is that right? He waited for them.
Exactly, which was very interesting. And then Captain do something similar. They said to control, we would like to turn more towards the phenomena. In your case, you turned more away from it, but he wanted
initially away and then slowly back.
Oh, yeah. And he wanted to turn towards it. Just he was curious to see will there be any reaction from the phenomena. And when that happened, it moved in increased speed enormously too. And then actually air traffic controllers start to shout, turn away immediately. And then when they were confronted, it happened in the same way like in your case. Captain was able to have a strong radar return on his weather radar. So similar situation again. And they started to turn away, and then phenomena stopped, and they also said the speed was about 7 Mach. They tried to calculate that with radar. And after that incident, it turned away. So it left them, and then actually military intervention started. But that part is a little bit vague, what happened later. But that is what actually drew me to your case, because there are quite a few similarities where we can see some kind of patterns with this unknown phenomena that is happening, I would say, in rare occasions. But I guess it happens from time to time, especially when we have these exceptional technical details. I was wondering, you mentioned that you were in intelligence at one point of your career, and such a rich aeronautical career. Did you had any other insight into other cases, or maybe talk with other pilots that maybe they experienced something similar to that effect?
We talked to lots of other pilots, and they'd seen things. But most of them were explainable. They could have been any number of different phenomena. But this one was unusual because radar was involved as well as visual sightings at the same time. So, this was a little bit unusual. But militarily, we know as much as you do, effectively, which is not that much. I had nothing really. My military side had virtually no relationship at all to a phenomenon like this. So I knew as much as the average guy on the street.
I think that the frequency of these exceptional cases is quite rare, at least what we have in public domain. Of course, we will never know the actual statistical frequency, but I would say from what we know, and that is then such a small stimuli to sort of forward some kind of bigger investigation. Of course, it happens from time to time, but aeronautically...
I know people get all carried away with conspiracy theories about
exactly.
People trying to keep things... I can't really see that as being viable because people eventually talk, deathbed confessions, all kinds of things. Yes, and if the numbers of people that are involved in this, it's got to leak. Eventually, it always leaks. I don't believe a lot of the conspiracy theories. I really don't. But in this case, I saw what I saw, and I can't explain it. And I just have to leave it there because it is unexplainable.
Exactly. It was such a pleasure to talk with you, Peter, about this case. It was quite an honor. Do you plan anything in the future to maybe write some kind of a book about your life? I think there was a book in there I said earlier. What's currently happening?
Yes, I actually, the year and a bit I spent in New Guinea flying, that was interesting. I actually flew cannibals out. They'd been locked up for eating one of their former friends. So they actually had 2 years in what they used to call calaboose, which is a prison built more like a chicken run. They could walk in and out any time they really liked, but because they got 3 square meals a day, they tended to stay. I flew them back. They were from Nomad River, which is in Papua, and I actually flew them from the West Sepik in Wanimo up to... let me see, Telefomin, which is in the Star Mountains, about 5,000 feet up. So I flew them there, and then another pilot was going to pick them up there with the police escort and fly them back to Nomad River in the Fly River Delta in southern New Guinea. So that was interesting, flying a bunch of cannibals. I managed to see a lot of unbelievable sights in New Guinea, including the Xartman Valley, which has only been penetrated by Europeans in 1967 was the first time. So that was pretty wild and raw. Again, 5,000 feet above sea level, with some wild people there, and that was very good. Flew all kinds of things in and out of the bush. And also, while I was there, I was a member of a platoon commander in Papua New Guinea Volunteer Rifles, based at Wewak and Delta Company. So I was a platoon commander in Delta Company, exercising in all the old World War II battlefields up behind Lae. That was very interesting. We had the Indonesian border incursions back and forth with the OPM Free Papua movement. And we were flying. OPM used to drop their wounded over the border at mission stations, and I'd fly in either the mission station or some of the nuns would drive a tractor with the wounded on the back into the nearest government airstrip, and I'd fly in and pick them up. And then when they recovered, drop them back near the border, probably in a place like Pagi, and tell them not to be naughty boys and don't get shot again. So that was interesting. That was very interesting. As I had 3 very near misses in New Guinea. One was very, very close. When I touched down, and theoretically I'd been out of gas for 20 minutes. So, and I was at low level. I flew up the coast at about 200 feet and with a roaring tailwind, and decided, should I go around and land into the wind as per normal? I said, to hell with that. I'm just going to put it on the ground. Of course, I knew I was almost out of gas. And I touched down, and the engine stopped. So I Had I tried to go around the land of the wind, I would have been in the harbour, in the bay. So I rolled to a stop without putting my feet on the brakes outside my hangar. So I figured I must have been doing something right that day. But yeah, lots of great stories up there in the Highlands, flying in the Highlands. That was very, very challenging, and lots of very challenging flying on the coast as well, actually, because of the weather. And over 8/8 jungle, just solid jungle, in a single-engine aeroplane. So if it ever stops, then you've got nowhere to go, which is challenging. But yeah, I managed to survive. Unfortunately, my aircraft did. The guy that replaced me lasted 6 weeks and then vanished in the Killyfass Gap area. And they had 17 aircraft and helicopters and whatever looking for him over a week and couldn't find him. And in the end, 3 months later, a local Australian patrol officer, a KIAP, stumbled across him, what was left of him, and he just missed the gap, so in cloud. So that was the end of him and my aeroplane. So anyway, that's another tale.
Yeah, well, I can definitely say if you will ever write a book, I will be your first buyer, because I can definitely see that there are lots of events. Thank you so much, Peter, for the overall breakdown of the incident. I wish you all the best wishes at your part of the world in Auckland, and hope to talk to you once in the future, maybe again.
That'd be lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.